Okay, rewind, and here we go again. When the limited series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, debuted in March 2021, it brought back two characters alongside protagonists Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, who had not been seen since Captain America Civil War in 2016, the Sharon Carter and Helmut Zemo. Sharon Carter's initial introduction in the MCU was in Captain America the Winter Soldier, where she was known as Kate, a neighbor of Steve Rogers, apparently, and a potential love interest for him. Her true identity as Sharon Carter, niece of Peggy Carter, is only revealed in Civil War, and the admittedly underheated romance between her and Steve does step up fractionally when the characters share a kiss. A scene that now raises so many uncomfortable questions in the wake of Endgame's finale. In these initial two appearances, Sharon largely conforms to the traditional role of female characters in superhero narratives. While undercover as Kate, her stated occupation is that she's a nurse, and therefore she is associated with stereotypical gendered ideas of nurturing, caring femininity. While her appearance is not coded in the hypersexualized manner that dominates comic book texts and can be seen to a certain extent in Sharon's appearance within the comic books, in the screen adaptations, she has largely been translated in a way that does not conform to that hypersexualization, but she is still presented as meeting Western beauty ideals. As played by the actress Emily Van Camp, she is young, beautiful, and blonde. And her role is still in those films, limited to being a sympathetic helper to the male protagonists and, as stated, the possible romantic partner. Sharon's goodness, and therefore her heroism, is largely implied through her looks, her family connection to Peggy Carter, and her affiliation with the good guys. As Facciani, Warren, and Vendemia argue in their 2015 content analysis of comic books with regards to race, gender, and class, they say the normative portrayal of women and minorities in comic books has tended to reflect simplified, exaggerated, and immature views of gender norms and race relations. While Sharon's early appearances might not necessarily be seen as immature in how she is presented, she is still very much coded through nurturing and non-threatening femininity. Her reappearance in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier presents a very different character, a more cynical and bitter personality after she is effectively abandoned by Steve after the end of Civil War and has remade herself as a black market dealer in Madripoor. And this is where we find out if the sound works this time.
Seem to have a guardian angel.
Well, this is too perfect. Drop it, Zemo.
Sharon?
You cost me everything.
Sharon, wait. Someone recreated the super soldier serum, and Zemo had a lead.
Well, that explains why you guys are here. And Selby's dead.
So what are you doing here?
I stole Steve's shield, remember? I also took the wings for your ass so that you could save his ass from his ass. Unlike you, I didn't have the Avengers to back me up, so I'm off the grid in Madripoor.
Hey, don't blow that smoke at me. I was on a run, too.
Is, big difference. I don't speak to my family anymore. I can't. My own father doesn't know where I am.
Listen, Sharon, we need your help. Please.
This isn't over.
The concept of heroism, what it means, how it is defined, and the people who are labeled as such is a theme that runs throughout the series. And the constructed nature of heroism and the hero are verbalized by Sharon. Her disillusionment with these ideas and her jibes at the protagonists lead to Bucky's statement of, wow, she's kind of awful now. Her cynicism resonates with the arcs of a number of characters. The abused and understandably bitter African-American super soldier Isaiah Bradley, who was imprisoned for 30 years for performing exactly the same sort of unsanctioned rescue of POWs that Steve Rogers did in Captain America: The First Avenger. But while the white Steve Rogers becomes a national icon and hero, the black Isaiah becomes the convict and is experimented upon for numerous decades. The idea of the hero as construct is articulated even by John Walker, the highly decorated soldier selected to be the next Captain America, again, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, who, when dismissed from that role, tells the Senate committee that you built me. And I think there's something very pertinent about that phrasing. He doesn't say, you made me, you even constructed me, you taught me. It's very specific, you built me, as though he has a machine that has been put together for a specific function. And that idea of the soldier as something that is built by the state is something that is explicitly manifested in the character of Bucky Barnes, a highly accomplished soldier in World War II, turned into a cybernetically enhanced super soldier at the hands of Hydra. As Bucky himself puts it, he went from one fight to another for 90 years. So inherent critiques of the military-industrial complex are another key component to the themes explored in the series, but more of that shortly. The implied moral authority of the hero, especially those whose abilities have been enhanced through the super soldier serum, is questioned even more closely by Helmut Zemo, the Sokovian officer who served as the primary villain in Civil War, and here is brought into an uneasy alliance with Sam and Bucky. And we see them here in Zemo's private jet in one of the series' more memeable moments.
I told him about Trouble Man. He wrote it in that book. Did you hear it? What'd you think?
I like 40s music, so
You didn't like it?
I liked it.
It is a masterpiece, James. Complete, comprehensive. It captures the African-American experience.
He's out of line, but he's right. It's great. Everybody loves Marvin Gaye.
I like Marvin Gaye.
Steve adored Marvin Gaye.
You must have really looked up to Steve, huh? But I realized something when I met him. The danger with people like him, America's super soldiers, is that we put them on pedestals.
Watch your steps, Zemo.
They become symbols, icons, and then we start to forget about their flaws. From there, cities fly, innocent people die, movements are formed, wars are fought. You remember that, right? As a young soldier sent to Germany to stop a mad icon. Do we want to live in a world full of people like the Red Skull? That is why we're going to Madripoor.
I really love in the scene how Zemo is basically that one entitled gap year student who is then mansplaining all of the cultural artifacts that he's appropriated to people from that culture. Yeah, so it sums him up. So the fleshing out of Zemo's character and a number of discussions between him and the two series protagonists serve to make him a more nuanced and even sympathetic character than his iteration in Civil War, quickly making him a fan favorite. And this is possibly also to do with the popularity of actor Daniel Broyle himself and what became the notorious dancing Zemo meme. And this was actually a spontaneous moment on Broyle's part that he didn't know would make it into the final edit. And due to fan demand, this very brief sequence was released as a looped hour-long supercut by Marvel Entertainment, actually only a few weeks after it initially dropped. And if you look at the comments on the thread on YouTube, you have things that include, you either die a villain or you live long enough to see yourself being loved by the fans. And the show that makes you love Zemo and hate Captain America, it's John Walker, not Sam, it's very clear. And while Walker is very much the anti-hero of the piece, the fan responses demonstrate that the blurring of the boundaries between hero and villain that occurs within the shows extend how the characters are perceived in fandom as a whole, and possibly further colored by the affection that audiences have for the actors themselves, which is probably the topic for next year's paper. So Zemo is beloved by fans, and while he is still not positioned as a hero or even necessarily a good guy within the series itself, the moral complexity and ambiguity of his arguments and certain of his actions elevate his character from binaristic ideas of good and bad. And this overall blurring is further made explicit in the character of Carly Morgenthau. Normally the villain of the piece, but her radically reconfigured character opens up numerous sites for the critique of power structures, especially along the lines of race and class. The comic book origins of Carly's character is as Carl Morgenthau, otherwise known as Flag Smasher, the wealthy and once again white son of a Swiss banker turned diplomat who turns to anti-nationalist violent terrorism in order to promote world peace. You need to think about that. This character is then reworked to become Carly Morgenthau, a 19-year-old mixed-race woman initially displaced during the blip and then displaced again after the snap that brings everyone back. And the return of all those lost after the final battle against Fenos is naturally the triumphant high point of Endgame. But the real-world social, economic, and political impacts of these events are not really addressed within the MCU until the Falcon and the Winter Soldier foregrounded them, mapping them onto historic experiences of poor and excluded communities, that is, mainly but not exclusively non-white, in America and also globally. And the need for representation and advocacy is clearly articulated by Carly's group, the Flag Smashers.
I didn't think there could be another Captain America until I met you. Now, back then, there was just good and bad. But the world's more complicated now. People are lost. They need a leader who looks like them, who understands their pain. Someone who understands that today's heroes don't have the luxury of keeping their hands clean. What we're doing will outlive the legacy of that shield.
That shield is a monument to a bygone era. A reminder of all the people history just left out. If anything, that shield should be destroyed. This serum is how we make change.
So, the representation of the characters within the series, the stated need for diverse groups of people to see people who look like them, resonates with the real-world growth of inclusivity and diversity that has been apparent in Phase 4 and now Phase 5 of the MCU. In 2015, a content analysis of American comic books identified that 85% of comic book characters were male, 86% of all characters were white, and 79% of protagonists were white men. As the authors of that study state, while modern-day comics may not be as blatantly racist as earlier ages, our data shows that Black characters are still disproportionately portrayed as low class and possessing less agency than white characters. The African-American comic book writer Dwayne McDuffie had this to say in 2009. If you do one Black character or a female character or an Asian character, then they aren't just that character. They represent that race or that sex, and they can't be interesting because everything they do has to represent an entire block of people. Mark Singer argues the point that this sort of tokenization, as identified here by McDuffie, results in the development of superheroes who are marked purely for their race. And he gives examples such as Black Lightning and Black Panther. And this idea is something that is lampshaded within the series. We see an example here, with Sam Wilson being referred to as Black Falcon on a number of occasions by people, even though he is very clearly simply Falcon, and he makes these points of, is that just because he's Black? However, as Mark Singer also goes on to say, in recent years, some comic creators have demonstrated that the superhero genre's own conventions can invite a more nuanced depiction of minority identity. Race in contemporary comics proves to be anything but simplistic. If some titles reveal deceptively soothing stereotypes lurking behind their veneers of diversity, then others show complex considerations of identity. This complexity is becoming more apparent in the recent phases of the MCU, and is central to the themes and narratives of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The complexities of racial identity and representation, both historic and current, are explored across all 6 episodes, but so too, as this paper examines, are the concepts of the hero and the villain. In the case of Sharon Carter, the boundaries between the hero and the villain are wholly blurred. She provides valuable assistance to Sam and Bucky, but is also revealed to be the feared power broker, the head of a violent criminal empire. Sharon's lethal shooting of Carly Morgenthau during the final confrontation can be read simultaneously as an act to save Sam's life, but also to preserve her secret identity that is on the point of being revealed. Even when given a pardon, an apology, and the reinstatement of her former position in the CIA, the mid-credit sequence shows that not only has Sharon retained her position as power broker, but is planning on using her new access to military weapons and intelligence to sell on the black market. Throughout the series, Carly Morgenthau is also positioned as an ambiguous character. Many of the acts committed by her and the flag smashers are clear acts of terrorism, but they are also delivering crucial medicines and supplies to vulnerable and displaced people, and are fighting against forced resettlements, all of which win them sympathy and support in universe. As Carly becomes increasingly radicalized as the series progresses, her potential to be steered towards a less violent path decreases. Zemo, with his avowed anti-super soldier agenda, calls Carly and her followers fascists. However, the actions of this group are juxtaposed with the activities of John Walker. And he, with the backing of the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council, is seen carrying out raids in safe houses and refuges, angrily demanding that the people he is brutalizing show him respect purely due to the fact that he is Captain America. Walker becomes effectively the public face of the GRC, and armed with the shield and as the new star-spangled man, either with or without a plan, he becomes the embodiment of a particularly American brand of aggressive insertion into global politics, which can be read as a critique of the positioning of America as the world's policeman. Violent authoritarianism, when carried out by a government-mandated body, is security. When carried out by a dissident group, it's terrorism. It is, given these critiques, perhaps also telling that the series' most overt and chilling act of violence is perpetrated by Walker himself.
It wasn't me! It wasn't me!
Walker is stripped of his role as Captain America, and he's given an other than honorable discharge from the army, which is a punishment that is far below anything that would be handed down to a civilian who committed a violent murder, as this completely bypasses the need for a court-martial. So again, this draws parallels, as Lisa Grauso argues, with real-world tendencies for law enforcement and enlisted military involved in murder and other serious crimes to be let go relatively unscathed. And again, if we factor in the racial component, as a white officer having committed this act, his treatment is very different from what probably would be handed down to a non-white person in the same position. Immediately after the outcome of Walker's hearing, he is approached by Valentina, who is later revealed to be director of the CIA in Wakanda Forever, who begins her recruitment of him to the role of US agent and reassures him that no one in government has any qualms about what Walker did. The only issue is that he did it in public, and rather circles back to actually the point that's made by Nico, who is the flag smasher that Walker actually murders. He's the one who says that heroes necessarily have clean hands, and Walker's certainly very much dirtied in the eye of the public. So, in conclusion, the series sets up these dichotomies of good and bad, hero and villain, and immediately begins to unpick and recontextualize these concepts. In the protagonists, Sam and Bucky, we have more straightforward representations of heroism, but even here is more complexity, with Sam's journey to becoming Captain America informed by historic and enduring racism and inequalities in American society. and Bucky's traumatic past as the Winter Soldier, leaving him deeply skeptical of military and political processes, as well as questioning his own self-worth and ability to be a good person. Sharon, Zemo, Carly, and Walker, to various degrees, all navigate between points of good and bad, and open up clear sites for interrogation about what these concepts mean, and the ambiguity in their characterizations directly interrogate this. When mapped onto contemporary global politics, the critique of the neoliberal capitalist state and the military-industrial complex is clear. Yes, many of the narrative strands of the series are ostensibly wrapped up by the end. Sam and Bucky both are in much better places than at the start, and both are unequivocally good guys. But there is still much ambiguity about the future direction of some of these secondary characters. They remain unsettling presences and serve as a reminder that the line between hero and villain is not necessarily blurred so much as non-existent.